The sty, the cave, and the well. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. For the second time in about 3 weeks, our rector, Father Victor, has posted a sermon. This one's directly on our website that essentially has everything you need for this Sunday, and therefore evacuating any possibilities for the junior clergy to, shall we say, steal again, since I've already done that once before. Therefore, I want to focus on one paragraph in the posted sermon. It's dealing with our gospel today. It deals with the idea of when we wake up, the wake-up call, as it were. Think about it this morning. For many of us, the wake-up call came about 6 o'clock. If you have small children, it came earlier. It comes often. The wake-up call is usually from a state of darkness to a state of light. The lights come on. That's one of the first things we have to train ourselves to do. If you don't turn on the lights, at least at my age, I could have trouble. As soon as I get the lights on, now I realize that, okay, I have to get out of bed. I've got to get moving. The wake-up call for us really is a response where we are going into light and getting our day about us. But some people will tell us about wake-up calls that go this way, when you didn't think it through. Recently, someone was saying about a love situation, and there was some harm, and there was some damage in this situation. And God bless her, she said, with all humility, to the question, what happened? She said, I didn't think it through. And in that moment, there's a wake-up call in that, a coming into light. But the paragraph in the sermon that I'm speaking of mentions St. Theophan the Recluse, who comments, and I paraphrase, that the spiritual wake-up call comes to us when we are in darkness and when we're alone. That these two features of being in the dark and being by ourselves causes us to come to ourselves, to wake up, as it were, spiritually. And so we come to the pigsty, and that's what happens to our man, our prodigal man. He finally has the wake-up call, because he's hungry. Hunger is his darkness. I would assume the stench of the animals might have had some influence too. Never mind that he's working in the pen of the forbidden animal. It couldn't get more rich than that you have in fact bottomed out, as it were. And so in this moment of being alone and being in a type of darkness, he wakes up. He wakes up to his hunger and realizes, in my Father's house, there's much to eat. In my Father's house, I'm a prince, but here I'm a slave. And so the magnificent moment takes place. He reasons, he wills, he moves forward and says, I will go to him. I will return to his house. I will start moving. And then comes the movement out of isolation, out of darkness. This is confirmed in two great events that predate the gospel story. Ironically and interestingly enough, this is the centerpiece of the philosopher Plato's Republic, where in the beginning of Book 7, the entire work, a 10-book work, hinges upon a tale, which has the same concept of darkness and waking up. In this tale, Master Plato proposes to us a cave where there are people living in this cave in chains. And by some kind of grace, some kind of accident, one man breaks free enough to turn his head. He turns his head from being locked down to suddenly having freedom. And in this freedom, he's able to see for the first time the source of the light that actually illumines this cave. And in this, that he realizes that everything they had seen before, which were shadows, are in fact illusions and falsehoods. And in this recognition that he's been living a life of falsehood, imprisonment, and shadows, he makes the all-important move. he makes the move to come out of it. And the story goes briefly to say that he will crawl his way out of this cave. He will come to the surface. He will then experience the objects that he had seen before in the cave, which were the shadows of the objects being carried about. And then you'll see them for what they are. And very slowly, his eyes will accustom to the sunlight, and he will see objects and recognize what they are in reality. And then you'll have another recognition that the reality of what he's seeing is actually due to the light. That's a gospel idea. And it's one that we need to be aware of, because St. John tells us in the first chapter of his gospel, why do they hate the word? Why do they hate the Lord? And he makes it very clear, because they hate the light. And so Plato, 4 centuries ahead, just about 4 centuries ahead of the coming of Christ, has already got this crystallized in a masterpiece document that his eponymous man, this is Socrates, of course. We have a Socrates here in our church, so today is really your day. This man is actually seeing objects for what they are, and then he dares to actually look to the sun and realize the source of all the light itself. There are a lot of Christian themes, and here comes another one. There's a double waking up. The man will turn and go back to his people down in the cave. That's a Christological theme if there ever was, written by a pagan nonetheless. He will go back, and he will descend back down again, and he will be blinded for the second time. The first time the light blinded him. The second time the darkness will re-blind him. And he will attempt to show his brothers and sisters in chains that the real light and the real objects are above. And for his trouble, he will be mocked. And for his trouble, as the story goes, they'll kill him. And we know that this is, of course, an allegory of Socrates. That takes us then to the well. Even earlier in history, now we're almost 800 perhaps years ahead of Christ. And there is a man, a Jew, with brothers. His name is Joseph. And his brothers, jealous of him, jealous of his talents, jealous of his good looks, seize upon him. They think him dead. They throw him in a well. They now know he's going to be dead. And he survives in the well. He lasts 3 days. In what? In darkness and in isolation. And in those moments of darkness and isolation, he cries out to the Lord, Lord, hear me. Lord, help. Lord, have mercy. And then the miracle. Egyptians come. Yes, Egyptians. Those people who will, in fact, protect Jesus and his mother and his foster father Joseph in Egypt. They will come. They will hear his voice. They will pull him out of the well. Resurrection. They will take him. They will feed him. They will mend him. And then they will recognize his ability, and the story, as you know, goes on. Joseph will rise to a very high place. He will not forget what his brothers have done to him, nor will he repeat the story of Cain and Abel and visit violence upon them. When the time comes, as you know, and this is Genesis, he will secretly move amongst them. They will not recognize him. And instead of condemning them, he forgives them. And then they truly wake up and recognize him. And so they come out of their isolation and their darkness. And so there you have it, the pigsty, the cave, and the well. The alone moment, the dark moment when we wake up and we see the light. May God have mercy on us.